Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and I just went on a crazy 15-game win streak live on stream up to 3190 ELO with a Pokemon you would never expect. Great League, Ampharos. Now this team is not a team of my own creation. I owe full credit to Miro Poke, a Japanese battler. Ampharos stands out from a crowded field of electric types because with Trailblaze it can actually hit back against the ground types that give electric such problems. Credilli is the ever-flexible safe switch, and as the closer, Toedscruel, which is so great at shutting down ground types and toxic mons like Bastiodon. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And we're off to a strong start in game number 1, picking up a winning lead, Ampharos into Shadow Scizor. Shadow Scizor is going to strike first with a Night Slash. Even though Ampharos does resist Bullet Punch, Night Slash would still do quite a lot of damage, so I will put up the shield. If there's one thing I know about Scizors, they love to shield, so I'm actually going to go for the double resisted Trailblaze. Now I've boosted up my Ampharos, and it's about to be absolutely terrifying. Night Slash is going to be shielded, Scizor gets fully farmed down, and now I exit with a ton of boosted energy, and that's good, because in comes Bastiodon. 2 volt switches and the Trailblaze is going to put this Ampharos now at +2. Ampharos continuing to farm, Bastiodon looking for the full farm down, but Ampharos is about to be at +3 attack. Trailblaze lands, here's going to be the +3 brutal swing. Bastiodon gets the full farm down, but loses almost its entire health bar. Bastiodon will fire off the flamethrower. This will be super effective damage into the Toedscruel, but all they have left in the back is Azumarill, and this game is over. In comes Credilli, and Credilli has such a dominant matchup into the Azumarill. I'm always going to be going for the Rock Tomb, even if my opponent calls the bait, which they do. Lowering their attack is very important because that is going to put the Toedscruel outside of Ice Beam range. Speaking of Ice Beam, they launch it into Credilli. I throw on alignment as that would have been when they make their next Ice Beam. Rock Tomb is finally going to be shielded, and Azumarill can never hold 2 charge attacks, and that is what's going to lose them this game. Azumarill gets to fire off the Ice Beam into Credilli, but Toedscruel gets to the Seed Bomb, winning charge attack priority. Seed Bomb is easily going to be enough to knock out Azumarill and take the game 1 win. We've got more of a neutral lead in game number 2, leading Ampharos into Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff will often have Mud Slappers in the back, so I'm pretty happy to stay in this lead matchup and play it out. Trailblaze is going to be no-shielded by the Wigglytuff. There's the Mud Slapper, in comes Marowak. And Marowak just gets absolutely hard countered to smithereens by Toedscruel. The original battler, Meropoke, used Torterra, but personally I prefer Toedscruel. Toedscruel doesn't have Stone Edge, so it doesn't have a move that can hit flyers for super effective, but what Toedscruel has is bulk, and that means that Toedscruel is actually able to keep alignment versus the Mud Slappers, whereas with Torterra can actually lose switch. Predicting they're going to have a Gastrodon in the back, I aggressively pivot into the Ampharos, and there is the Gastro right on schedule. It was very important to save the Toedscruel because Toedscruel is going to be very important in the fight against Gastrodon. Gastrodon will go for a Body Slam on charge attack priority, but guess what? Toedscruel's too bulky. I withstand the damage, and now I'll get to force their final shield. Seed Bomb is going to be shielded. There's the switch into Credilli, and back in comes the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff has a massive amount of energy stored up from earlier in the match, and they're going to be throwing it here. But they're getting outpaced. I'm able to get to the Rock Tomb, taking the knockout. They're not going to get their second debuff applied, and with no ability to grab my final shield, they just cannot win. As back in comes the Gastrodon, I'm able to get to the Grass Knot. This is 1 stage debuffed, but it will not matter. Down goes Gastrodon, and that's a good game. Great lead in the next match, Ampharos into Empoleon. Opponent safe switches into Shadow Sableye, and that is an incredibly cool pick. I have a second response to Empoleon in the back with the Toedscruel, so I'm very happy just staying in and playing this out with Ampharos. This team functions more of an ABC style team, where even though both back Pokemon cover Ampharos against ground types, they don't have a lot of shared weaknesses, so you don't often have to play where you have to pivot out of leads. But rather, you can kind of just stay in and then play it out from there. In comes Jumpluff, and considering I have a Toedscruel in the back, I have very high incentive to just let the Jumpluff knock me out and put the Credilli on it. In comes Credilli, opponent sends out Empoleon, but Empoleon is about to get absolutely destroyed by Toedscruel. These Mud Slaps add up quite a bit. Empoleon super effective damage with the Drill Peck. Opponent realizes there's no way they can win this game, and they will resign the match. Great lead in the next match, Ampharos into Togekiss. I promise I do have a bunch of very negative leads coming up here in a few battles, but I did want to show that Ampharos can win some leads as well. They safe switch into Lickitung, which is an incredibly cool pick, and I send out Credilli. I'm honestly not too familiar with the Credilli Lickitung matchup, so out of precaution, I put up a shield on their first Power Whip. I want to maintain switch advantage because Ampharos is obviously going to do amazingly against Togekiss, but I also know that my Credilli has quite a bit of value into the Togekiss as well, as Togekiss is really not going to appreciate a Rock Tomb. They go for the Power Whip, there's going to be the switch in the back, they have Shadow Primeape, and Shadow Primeape I believe only threw 4 Karate Chops, and a Rage Fist is not something that I have to respect. Had they built up to the Ice Punch, it would have been a very tough call, but luckily for me, they did not. And now these Mud Slaps just add up more and more and more. And you know what? Let's go for the wrap. I decided to only hit a few bubbles in case they decide to no shield, but they will end up shielding and looking to just take the knockout. But from here, Ampharos should be on cleanup duty, as Ampharos will be able to take the 1-turn head start as back in comes the Togekiss. I pivot into Credilli just to get a little bit of extra acid damage and to force their energy, and now I can close out the game with Ampharos. Ampharos is completely walled here in terms of charge moves, but that's okay. We're just going to boost up with Trailblaze. Trailblaze gets the shield, and look at the damage. These Volt Switches, absolutely criminal. Brutal Swing takes the knockout. They still have a Primeape. That's getting Volt Switch down, and they will resign the match. Hopping into the next match, picking up an absolute nightmare lead, Ampharos into Chestnut. The first time I played against the Chestnut lead with this team, I safe switched into Credilli. They immediately hard countered me with an Empoleon, and I ended up losing the game from there. I learned that the third is typically Dedenne. So now that I know the common backline behind a Chestnut lead, I decide to play things a little bit differently. I'm not switching out of this lead matchup. If the third is Dedenne, Dedenne is completely useless into my backline. So I'm just going to stay in with the Ampharos, double shield, and try and get the Chestnut as low as possible. They have to pivot out because they're running an ABB team. They have to check for the Mud Slapper. I just stay in with the Ampharos, force the shield. They are forced to throw a charge attack because now I am +2 with the Volt Switches, and Hydro Cannon will take the knockout. But the important thing is, I did not switch lock the Toedscruel, so I can bring in the Toedscruel, look for a full farm down. The bulk of Toedscruel so important as I'm able to survive the Drill Peck and fully slap down. I do exit with quite a lot of energy, and we already know that Chestnut is very, very low from all the damage it took from Ampharos. My opponent sends out Dedenne just to absorb some energy, but I'm going to be very careful about over-farming. There's the switch. I was going to throw 3 and the move there, but they decide now's the time to bring out Chestnut. Chestnut now going to be answered with Credilli. Credilli snipes down with acids. Even if they superpowered, there was no way out because Dedenne cannot beat a Toedscruel and a Credilli. We see another tough lead in the next match, leading Ampharos into Abomasnow. These kind of grass types are very uncommon. Abomasnow, Chestnut, they're not run much, but I did encounter them, so I figured showing how I play my way out of it is probably worthwhile. In this scenario, the fact that this team is not a known entity was very valuable for me. As my opponent ends up staying in, a lot of Abomasnow teams are pretty weak to Credilli, and my opponent has no way of knowing that I am ABA weak to Abomasnow. Based on the fact that I aggressively pivoted out, they assume that I have a good check to it, so they end up just giving up switch, and in comes Feraligatr. But Feraligator's not going to like what comes next, as in comes Ampharos. Ampharos is specifically non-shadow for its survivability. It's able to tank that no problem. In the back is the Dedenne, and the reveal. It's not a Pokemon that's strong to Abomasnow, it is Toedscruel. The Dedenne goes for the Play Rough. Play Rough does not even two-shot. I'm going to throw 4 Mud Slaps and fire off this Seed Bomb right before they're able to get their next Play Rough. Seed Bomb will take the knockout. Back in comes Feraligatr, and there's just no way out. I just had charge attacks loaded on everything. Another game, another bad lead, Ampharos into Stunfisk. Something that I've noticed is a lot of Stunfisk leads do not have a good response to a Credilli safe switch. Stunfisk plus Flyer is a very common core, as Stunfisk usually only has to fear Mud Slap, and Flyers do a good job of checking that. But that's where Credilli can be very annoying for these teams. My opponent ends up no-shielding a Grass Knot. They send Togekiss into the Credilli, but because of the one-turn switch, I'm able to outpace, get a Rock Tomb, and the moment the switch clock is up, send in Ampharos. My opponent, they are debuffed. Aura Sphere, not going to hit for a ton of damage now that it's at -1, and my Ampharos is going to look for a double no-shield and a full farm down. Because, why do we run Ampharos over other electric types? the flexibility. In comes Stunfisk. Stunfisk is going to be losing charge attack priority. Trailblaze is going to take the knockout. And in the back is Shadow Talonflame. And look at that damage. In comes Credilli. Credilli will be able to force the final shield with Rock Tomb. And then I'm going to knock out a Talonflame with a Toedscruel. In comes Toedscruel, Talonflame farming to 100 energy. This matchup is never a good idea, but specifically because I have a 2-0 shield advantage, I can send out the Toedscruel, make it to the Wrap. Wrap does not take the knockout, but the Mud Slap after will to secure the win. Ampharos into Gastrodon in the next match. I save switch into Credilli, and the Gastrodon is again staying in. Gastrodon fires off its Water Pulse immediately there, risking a charge attack priority tie, but I'm more than happy just to take the energy. Gastrodon, oh my goodness, it looks like they're probably going to go for a double shield farm down if I had to guess. If they haven't pivoted out by now, they're probably not going to. And if they're going to double shield, I may as well go for a Rock Tomb. So that way, when they exit with energy, Water Pulse already doesn't do a ton to Toedscruel, but now it's going to do even less. And since all shields are down, maybe I can even Trailblaze it later. Opponent ends up pivoting a Carbink into a Toedscruel, and that's how you know something has gone very seriously wrong for my opponent. Ideally, at some point, I would love to switch into the Ampharos, because if Ampharos can potentially get a Volt Switch down of something and try and exit with a charge attack loaded, I think that would probably be the best case scenario. So I'm going to pivot into the Ampharos. Ampharos looking for the full Volt Switch down, can't quite get there. They will get to a Rock Slide. Rock Slide does add up, but now they can't bring in the Gastrodon. Gastrodon's going to get KO'd. In the back, they have Togekiss. And my opponent was very, very soft in the back to Credilli. That forced them to stay in and burn both shields, and once they did, they were just getting swept by Ampharos no matter what they did. Ampharos boosting up its damage, they try and snipe with the Gastrodon just to get counter-sniped by a Seed Bomb from Toedscruel. Toedscruel takes the knockout, in comes Togekiss. They have quite a bit of energy, but I will just fire off the Seed Bomb. In hindsight, I should have just thrown one more Mud Slap and gone for the Wrap, but Mud Slapping down a Togekiss ended up being pretty fun. Picking up another bad lead, Ampharos into Dedenne. A save switch into Credilli, and out comes Lurantis. Lurantis is an incredibly cool pick. With my opponent's superpowers, however, they debuff themselves for the remainder of the matchup, so I felt pretty comfortable no shielding. Because if they end up firing off the superpower, and I don't know the exact Lurantis counts, because obviously Leafage did get buffed this season, so I'm not 100% sure, but I figured it was pretty safely going to be a Leaf Blade on the first one, and I'm pretty confident that Credilli will be able to flip switch. Lurantis is not necessarily a particularly strong answer to this Pokemon, so winning switch is massive, because Dedenne, what's it going to do against the Toedscruel? The answer is nothing. It is not going to be able to do anything. Credilli lands the Rock Tomb, putting Dedenne deep into the red HP, and I'm very curious as to what their third Pokemon is going to be. Whatever it is, I want to debuff it, so I end up actually shielding the Credilli, and in the back, they have Furret. Furret will get Rock Tombed, and now that they're debuffed, I can send in Ampharos to clean up. Ampharos can absorb a Swift normally, but applying a debuff is just going to make this matchup quite a bit easier. They end up going for a Trailblaze, looking to get their attack back to 0, but I'm going to go for a Trailblaze myself. Trailblaze is going to land. They will go for the Swift. I'm imagining Ampharos cannot hang on here. Ampharos, not the tankiest Pokemon around, but I can send out Toedscruel, and now they know there's just no way out. They have a Dedenne in the back, but what's Dedenne gonna do into a Toedscruel? We Mud Slap down Dedenne and take the win. Ampharos into Corsola in the next match. Now we do have Brutal Swing, which can hit for super effective, but Corsola's neutrals are so strong that Corsola is very, very fine here. My opponent ends up banking some energy, and they actually pivot out. They send in Furret, and I would much rather stay in against the Furret than have the Glaring Corsola stay in, because Glaring Corsola is just so bulky, its neutrals are so strong that even though you can hit it for super effective, it's not a super fun matchup for the Ampharos. I'm forced to fire off energy here, or they would have made it to another Swift. They put up a shield, and I just undertap. Now they're forced to give me both shields. The Brutal Swing is going to be no-shielded. They don't end up giving me both shields, and I pivot out, and I send in Credilli. Unfortunately, Credilli is going to be hard punished by Empoleon. This is not a fun spot to be as the Credilli. Credilli is taking big damage from these metal sounds. My opponent actually goes for a CMP tie here, and this means that if I survive this, I'm going to be able to take this knockout. So now Empoleon has to decide, are they really willing to give up the final shield? They say no. In comes Corsola. and my switch clock comes up just in time to save just a little bit of health on that Credilli and send out the Toedscruel. Again, this is where the bulk of Toedscruel will be very helpful. My opponent cannot knock out with 2 Nightshades. They'll need quite a few Astonishes first. So I'm going to look to farm up a ton of energy with the Toedscruel. I get the back-to-back Seed Bombs, and it's charge stack priority. If I get knocked out here, things could get a little bit tricky, but Toedscruel would never let me down. Nightshade will simply not take the knockout, and I'm going to leave with a parting gift of a last-second Seed Bomb. That forces the shield. I had switched the Ampharos out earlier, very close to a charge attack, and I'm able to get the Brutal Swing, barely hanging on to that Astonished damage and securing the win. We move to the next match, leading Ampharos into Dedenne. This is a losing matchup, but I have 2 better responses in the back. Safe switch Credilli going to be answered with Corviknight, and Corviknight is going to fire off an Air Cutter. They have a 30% chance to boost up their attack to help undo the Rock Tomb debuff that's about to land, but they're unable to do so. No luck this time, which means the Rock Tomb lands, and now they're going to be at -1. Flipping switch would be very, very helpful here, so I decide to put up the shield. Honestly, as you can tell, these battles were done a bit after midnight, so I wasn't really counting, so maybe they were at a payback, maybe they were not, but in my head, I thought they were, so I end up putting up a shield, and I shield an Air Cutter that ends up boosting, which is really, really tragic. I know that a payback will still not knock out here, so I am going to let it go. Payback lands, that is devastating damage, and it ends up being a CMP tie. Rock Tomb will KO the Corviknight, and winning switch advantage is everything that I wanted out of this matchup, because the Dedenne leads are often weak to Ampharos in the back. Now I get to bring out Toedscruel, completely invalidating Dedenne, and in the back, what do you know, it is a Azumarill. In this matchup, I end up throwing the Trailblaze on alignment, and this is by design. If I tried to overfarm and throw on good timing, I would have had to throw 2 more Volt Switches, and I felt that conceding the free bubble was worth it just to ramp up my Volt Switches because I need to get this Azumarill into Seed Bomb range. I'm going to get to force the final shield with the Trailblaze, but because I ramped up my Volt Switches, I should be able to get them into Seed Bomb range. They're definitely in Seed Bomb range now, so I can send in the Toedscruel. Ice Beam does not one-shot, even though it's double super effective, but I have the shield to use, so I may as well use it. I put up the shield, fire off the Seed Bomb, and lost lead after lost lead. It just does not matter. It's something that I really grew to love about this team, is this team is so strong at fighting back from negative positions. This next match, however, we are in a very advantageous position, leading Ampharos into a Moltres Scissor Core. You may notice these shiny Ampharos. These battles were actually done on my wife's account, but I felt like they did a good job of showing how the team plays, so I did want to include them. And because we get that boosted Volt Switch damage so early, we Volt Switch down the Shadow Scizor, we exit boosted with a ton of energy, and the moment Marowak comes out, I get to pivot out and send in the Credilli. Realistically, looking back on it, this is a misplay. I knew their whole team. They led Moltres and switched out at the start, so I should have just stayed in with the Ampharos, thrown the Trailblaze, because I can actually hit for super effective damage into the Marowak, let myself get farmed down, and then I would have had Toedscruel on the Marowak and Credilli on the Moltres, which is a winning endgame for me. But now, I'm reliant on my opponent making a misplay, which they do. Had they just stayed in and sacrificed the Marowak, they would have won the game immediately, but they end up saving the Marowak and taking a ton of damage in the process on their Moltres. Moltres is going to get farmed down after the Trailblaze, and I will get to fire off a boosted Brutal Swing into the Marowak. Marowak tanks that damage not super well, just for Toedscruel to be the final Pokemon to mud slap them down and take the win. Ampharos into Feraligatr in the next match. This is an incredibly nice lead. And anytime an opponent is staying in a matchup where you're hitting for super effective damage, you have to know they're probably core broken somewhere in the back. I will farm up. I could have done 2 Volt Switches, but I felt like it was a pretty obvious Trailblaze catch if I did, so I just throw 1 in the move, and I take the knockout. In comes Wigglytuff, and Wigglytuff is really not going to appreciate boosted Trailblazes. The boosted Trailblaze is going to be shielded up. Wigglytuff continues the farm, and they will fire off a Swift, because had they tried to farm, I could have made it to a 3rd Trailblaze. In comes Credilli, and Credilli really appreciates that Wigglytuff emptied all its energy, as now Credilli will just be able to take the knockout with the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb into the Wigglytuff does get shielded. Wigglytuff undertaps the Icy Wind, not even looking to throw on good timing. But this is -1. I do not have to respect this damage. In the back is Jellicent, and we should be in a pretty good spot to win this game. Jellicent is not going to appreciate the super effective damage from Seed Bomb, and Jellicent actually loses charge stack priority to the Toedscruel. Toedscruel takes some pretty significant damage from Shadow Ball. I'm going to look to farm up, trying to get to another Seed Bomb, but Jellicent is pretty nice pacing with Hex, so they will be able to outpace. The Surf is going to be shielded. Opponent switches out into Wigglytuff, but I'm very okay just knocking out the Wigglytuff here. So the Seed Bomb will take the KO. Back in comes the Jellicent, and I probably could have Mud Slapped down, but I was able to get the Seed Bomb, so I may as well fire off that energy, knock out the Jellicent, and we're able to take the win. Hopping to the final match, and we've got one final bad lead for the road, Ampharos into Stunfisk. Stunfisk stays in to chip the Credilli save swap with a Mud Bomb, and they're going to bring in their own Credilli. I've seen this story before, and I did not like how it ended. Stunfisk plus Credilli almost always has a flyer in the back, which means my Toedscruel is dead in the water. I need switch advantage, so I'm going to start shielding my Credilli. My opponent did not shield the first Rock Tomb. They ended up letting that go, and that is a big advantage for me. I end up shielding their Rock Tomb. They're going to start shielding, but landing that first non-debuffed Rock Tomb is incredibly helpful for me. My opponent will go for yet another Rock Tomb, but I'm going to switch it up and go for a Grass Knot. Grass Knot does not give a debuff, but what it does give is more damage than a Rock Tomb. And now looking at the health bars, I think I have a slight health advantage. It's going to be a race to the finish, but I need to try and commit to the acid farm down. Here we go. Can we get the farm down? Yes, we can. Surviving on 1 HP to make a last second farm down. And with switch advantage, I think I've won this game. I go for the Grass Knot. I actually make a second charge attack. I throw a Rock Tomb just in case they ended up catching on the flyer in the back that I'm expecting to see. And out comes Toedscruel. In the back is Shadow Murkrow. Shadow Murkrow is one of the hardest hitting Pokemon in the game. Surely a Shadow Foul Play knocks out the Ampharos, right? Wrong. Ampharos hangs on, firing off the Trailblaze. Trailblaze is going to be shielded by the Murkrow. They're getting farmed down. In comes Stunfisk. Stunfisk will be able to take the knockout onto the Ampharos, but the damage has been done. Credilli in the mid game, flipping switch advantage, secures our victory as Seed Bomb KOs the Stunfisk. All in all, I had an incredible amount of fun with this team. Again, big shout out to Miro Poke, a Japanese battler who ended up hitting 3250 with this team. They used Torterra over Toedscruel. I believe I mentioned earlier, but I ended up preferring Toedscruel because Toedscruel has a lot more convincing matchups into the ground types. Torterra is so frail that if something like a Gastrodon lands a Water Pulse, Gastrodon can actually Mud Slap it down, and I really wanted something that if I was able to wrest away switch advantage from my opponent, then I could basically just put them in jail, more or less, where they couldn't really do any damage courtesy of the Toedscruel. This is a really interesting team. I hadn't seen anyone use Ampharos before Miro Poke, and several people in my Discord tried the team and they had unbelievably good results with it. So I think this is genuinely, somehow, a really good climbing team for the Open Gray League. I do know that once the secret's out, people might start running things that give this team trouble. But for the meantime, this team has been incredible. One of my Discord members I gave the team to ended up going 10-0 to Legend immediately. I went 15-0, as I mentioned, over my last 3 sets with the team. Obviously, to start with, I had some growing pains with the team, so some 2-3, 3-2, 4-1 type sets. But man, this team, it's been so much fun. And in these final few days of the season, well, I almost said weeks there. It's probably final few weeks, because I guess there are still like 2 weeks left of the season. I'm just looking to have some fun and see if we can find some potentially interesting meta breakers. And man, Ampharos definitely feels like one. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.